Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Kim Davis. Today is Thursday, March the 7th of the year 2024. And welcome to Chalk Talk on a special day this week. Of course, Tuesday was election day and was busy doing some election stuff. And so we moved Chalk Talk back until later in the week. So thank you for adjusting your schedules when that becomes necessary. As always, super excited to have those of you joining with me live, and those of you who watch the replay on whatever platform you're watching it, thank you. I'm really excited about our guest today. Aaron Wilson is going to be joining us in just a few moments. Aaron is all things NFL and Texans. He used to be a beat writer for the Chronicle. He worked up in Baltimore and covered the Ravens. He's written for national publications about football. And he also does work for KPRC Local 2, covering the Texans and the NFL. So he was at the Combine last week. He's going to join us and give us an update about the Combine. We're going to talk free agency and what's happening with the Houston Texans, what we already do know, and what we should be on the lookout for. So looking forward to having Aaron Wilson join us. Of course, last night, the Houston Rockets were in action. But before we get to that, I want to remind you about one of our partners who's been with us for many years, and that is I Love Jinka. I want to remind you that, listen, if you've not started your regimen of Jinka, which is a high-level turmeric paste or capsule, you might want to think about it. It's great for all things inflammation, which is, of course, the root of many of the things that, ail us. Cholesterol, some people with diabetes have had some success. Joint pain, any of those things could be helpful if you were to add Jinka into your life. So where do you get it? Well, you can get it online at ilovejinka.com, or you can get it at HEB stores all across the state of Texas. And if you are in Texas and you want to get it from HEB, or at least in Southeast Texas, it's not all over Texas yet, but most places you can find it. Here is where you find it.
Here at HEB in the Healthy Living Department of Probiotics, you can find Jinka 7 days a week.
Yeah. Okay, what a Jinka say. Look at that. Jinka.
I Love Jinka. You will not be disappointed. Also, don't forget about your Kimmy treats. You can get them at KimmyTreats.com. What are Kimmy treats? It's vegan popcorn. It's Kimmy bars. It's the white chocolate cookie, the gluten-free cookies. And soon you're going to get the cilantro vinaigrette will be added to the website. It's not there yet, but it is coming. So go to KimmyTreats.com, and this is some of what you'll find. So the vegan popcorn comes in 3 flavors. It's ghost pepper, truffle, and chili cheese. And if you're wondering, I would say ghost pepper is probably my favorite flavor. There's also body butter for a little while longer until it gets too hot. When it gets to be summer, we'll take body butter off the website, but you will not be disappointed. Go to KimmyTreats.com and order your Kimmy Treats today. We ship all over the US of A. All right, so listen. Before we get to football, because Aaron's going to be joining us shortly, let's talk real quickly about what happened with those Houston Rockets. Last night, they were in action at home, taking on the LA Clippers. Of course, the Clippers, I want to say right now, are the 4th best team by record in the Western Conference, if you're looking at, the playoffs starting right away. And so they were in Houston. The Rockets were playing on the back end of a back-to-back. They defeated the Spurs the night before. Big game by Alperen Sengun. It was a career night for him. In case you missed it, that was Tuesday night. He had 45 points and I think 14 rebounds. And last night he had a triple-double. But the Rockets were in this game last night. At one point, they were up by 20. I'm going to tell you, sorry about that. All that was taken. So at one point, they led by as many as 20 points. They lost the game 116-122. In the fourth quarter, the Clippers outscored the Rockets 42-30. So they outscored them in the second half, but it was really that 42-point fourth quarter that really did them in. After the game, we talked with head coach Ime Udoka about just what happened in the game last night. And of course, he always goes back to the need for this team to be consistency. Here is head coach Ime Udoka.
I would say I think that was really about us not getting stops as why we got to slow the game down. Obviously, we weren't running as much like we were in the first half, and so we knew we had the advantage as far as that, but that's all dependent on us getting stopped. So we're getting better at reading the double teams. Obviously, getting better at passing, and guys are getting to their spacing and their spots, and it's just coming down to knocking those down. So I would say with more defense that affected us on the offense there.
What do you think about Alperen's performance coming off of what he did last night?
It was good. I mean, high level triple double, obviously. But in general, I think that's who he is, and he's starting to understand how teams are guarding him. Just wish we would have been a little more crisp down the stretch, and I think we made a few young mistakes.
So the question was about Alp, who had a career high on Tuesday night against the Spurs. Last night, his line was he had 23 points, 14 rebounds, and 14 assists. So that was a pretty impressive night for Alperen Sengun. And one of the things that Coach Udoka said is that he's beginning to realize who he is, like all that he can do. And Alp is still growing and getting better. And he talked about how he's watching more film, but there's a need for all of them to be more consistent. Alp has been upping his game. Last night, all 5 starters for the Rockets scored in double figures. I will tell you, in the second half, they just did not have an answer for Kawhi Leonard, who finished with 29 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. But it was really those 28 points that was huge for the Clippers. Of course, James Harden was back in town. He had 21 points, as did Paul George. The Rockets win it, but the key is you've got to finish those games. And so that's one of the things that, Fred VanVleet, who spoke with us after the game, Fred finished with 15 points. He was 4 of 9 from 3. He had 8 assists. And he talked about the fact that this Clippers team is one of the best teams in the league.
That's a good team. They're one of the best teams in the league for a reason. They're going to keep playing. They made some adjustments. They made some shots. Our defense we lost control of, kind of dictating. And ultimately, we played good one-on-one defense for most of the game, but they kept scoring third and fourth. Got to the line, made some threes. All in all, solid, but just, we didn't close it out there, at the end.
You mentioned one-on-one defense, and that's what you guys do well. Did they go away from that a little bit to try and move the ball better, create for each other instead of one-on-one?
Yeah, I thought between Kawhi and Paul George got hot a little bit there, made a couple of shots, and then we started, upping our pressure a little bit, and they started hitting the short rolls and hitting the swings. Terrence Mann hit a couple big threes. Norman Powell, Bones came in with a couple layups, and Plumlee came in out of nowhere, late to give them a boost. So they're going to make adjustments, but ultimately we're down there last 3-4 minutes, had a chance to win. We just didn't execute well enough to beat that team.
Did not execute well enough to beat that team. The Rockets are trying to get in the play-in tournament, right? They're trying to make it to be one of the top 10 teams in order to be in the play-in. Let me tell you where they stand today. If we look at the NBA standings right now, if the playoffs were to start today, the Houston Rockets are currently in the 11th position. They had been they're in the 12th position. They're right behind Utah. So it's Utah's 11, Houston's 12. Houston has a 27-35 record. The LA Lakers are in that 10th spot, and the Lakers are 34-30. There's about 20 games left in the season. There still is time, but the Rockets have got to do some things differently. They've got to start winning. They've got to not start winning. They've got to win some games, and they're going to have to win some games on the road. They're 27-35. Their schedule moving forward, they play at Portland tomorrow night. That's Friday. And then on Sunday, they play at Sacramento before they come back and play the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio next Tuesday. And then they're back at home for a couple of games. So still some work to do, still some opportunities. And they've got to really finish strong if they want to get a chance to be back in postseason for the first time since the 2019-2020 season. It's been 4 years since the Rockets were in postseason. And they were hoping that this was a tier, right? We heard Tillman Fertitta talk about this before the season, after last season, and also General Manager Rafael Stone about kind of what's next. And what's next is they want to be competitive and be competing for a spot. So they are being competitive. They are competing, and it's just a matter of how they finish. Here is Alpi um, Sengun after last night. This is him talking about facing the Clippers and just kind of where he is.
I mean, I can say last 1 month I wasn't that aggressive first quarter, So now I'm more aggressive in first quarter, and that put me keeping me in the game. So I'm starting game aggressive and getting rebounds, try my best in the defense. So that's the key for me now.
You're coming off a career high 45 points last night, and post career high assists 14 tonight. And they said after the game that you're doing a lot better job passing out a double team. Do you feel like you're getting more comfortable recognizing different coaches, teams are throwing at you?
Now, I'm watching videos, I'm watching all that films, what they do, how they guarded me. So, and before the game, I know what they're gonna do. So I'm trying to play like that, how they guarded me, what they're doing to me. So, yeah, that was important for me. I was struggling a little bit with double team, but now it's much more easy for me.
What made it so tough to get stopped?
Alperen Sengun, still, a lot of upside with him. But that's where they are. This Houston Rockets team was right there. I mean, they got out to they started out well, and the key for them is going to be able to play that way for 4 quarters. They've got to be able to be consistent and keep the intensity. And one of the questions you heard earlier, that one of the answers that you heard from Ime Udoka was about why the team started playing slower, and that's what he talked about in that first clip. Is because they just weren't. It always has to do with their defense, and so. When you hear when you play fast, when you play slow, when Amin Thompson, the rookie, comes in off the bench, he is, the tempo tends to speed up a bit. But when you slow it down to a half court offense, it does create some challenges in terms of, what you see in terms of slowing the game down. Jalen Green of late has been, playing a lot better. Last night was not his greatest game, but even with that, he finished with 15 points. He had only 2 assists and 3 rebounds, but he was 5 of 14 from the field, 4 of 9 from 3. I tell you, a guy that has been, I don't know that he is completely healthy since he's been back. He's come back from that injury. I think it was an abdominal strain, and that's Dillon Brooks. Last night, Dillon finished with 11 points. He was 5 of 10 from the field, only 1 of 6 from 3. But he just hasn't looked like the same Dillon with some of the intensity that we saw earlier. I'm not saying that he's not giving all he has. I just wonder if he is still bothered some by that injury. I'd imagine an abdominal strain has got to be something to get over, and it may just be a matter of taking time. And everything you do, like you use your abdomen, right? So being a defender, and so he's the guy really that you look for to put on a Kawhi Leonard, right? Because he's pretty much your best defender on the floor usually. And so late in the game, they just weren't able to really do a whole lot with Kawhi Leonard. So I'm excited to welcome in now. I think it may be his first time on Chalk Talk, so we'll have to make sure that we invite him back. But he is all things NFL and Texans expert. He was at the Combine last week. He's been a beat writer. He's covered the league. Few people know the NFL and the Houston Texans and what's happening around this league better than him. I am excited to welcome in for the first time, Aaron Wilson. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Kim. Appreciate you having me on. I am very, very grateful for the invitation, and yeah, I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I think about the NFL, and I watched the work that you did from the Combine. I followed you last week, and I said, I got to get Aaron on, right? Because I want to talk about what impressed you from the Combine, and then I want to talk about what's happening with the Texans. And so a lot of times guests will call in or they'll ask me questions, and I said, let me get somebody who can give us some great insight. So I'm glad that you could join us today. Let me ask you,
happy to.
What impressed you most, or who impressed you most from the Combine or surprised you when you were there last week in Indianapolis?
Impressive, obviously, Xavier Worthy, kind of an obvious one to run a 4.21 to beat
Yeah.
the time of John Ross, which was a 4.22. So he beat him by a nose to have the best 40-yard dash ever. So congratulations to Xavier Worthy, Texas Longhorn, not just a sprinter, a good football player too. So possibly late first round consideration now. These 40 times do kind of boost guys up. And then I would say I'm not surprised, but I was impressed by Dallas Turner and also by Chop Robinson to be edge rushers that are, 250-pound range running mid 4.4s, which is running back times. That's
Mm.
also impressive. But beyond that, looking at, some people that would excel in several metrics, like the linebacker from North Carolina State, Peyton Wilson, and just a good all around athlete. I like the way he handled the interviews. I thought he was smooth with everything and he helped himself. As far as surprises, I'm trying to think of someone that you know, he told us he was going to run a 4.4, and I know he was joking to Vondre Sweat,
Yeah.
big man, but I worry a little bit about him. Just he's heavy, and I was
Yeah.
hoping that he was going to be in a little better shape. I wasn't surprised by that, but it had been advertised to me privately that he was going to come in and really be ready and mature, and I thought he had a bit of a disappointing NFL scouting combine.
So, Aaron, let me ask you, um, how much does the scouting combine weigh on a player's future? I mean, are there players who come to the combine? How many come to the combine and their draft status changes one way or the other because of what they do at the combine?
Some hold serve, right, where they were already in good standing, and then others raise eyebrows or cause red flags for themselves with things they might say in an interview or because of their medical. And the teams already have the background. They do background checks looking for character issues. There are things that the teams are aware of that are not in public records, not just arrests and things like that. There might be something they have information about, even from sealed juvenile documents. They might know about how did you treat the strength staff or the trainer? Were you rude to the academic counseling folks from the university? All of those things, if you've done something, expect them to know it. And also, on the flip side, if you are a kind hearted individual and a good teammate, they will know that too. So, anyone that lies or tries to hide or is defensive, you will hurt your chances. Now, some people can get away with not working out, like Caleb Williams.
Right.
He is in that elite category, Marvin Harrison Jr. The people that are worried about the history of the combine or the popularity of the combine, I think they're worried about the wrong things. There are certain players that don't have to play by the same rules as these other players. And if you are a high first round draft pick, you could literally skip the combine. And yeah, you would get, I'm sure, lots of weird attention from people, but would you still be drafted high, still make the same amount of money, and still enter the NFL? Absolutely. And I think that's where some people misunderstand. Not everyone has to conform. This is considered, even though they're drafting you, it is still a job process. There's a human resources aspect to it. There are
Mhm.
questions that can be construed as illegal, and they're rules for a reason. But yeah, it's still a free country. Last time I checked, and like it's just like media. I have lots of choices. What do I report? What do I not report? What do I hold back? Do I tell the fans everything? No, I don't. I mean, I think a lot of people will do a lot of things for a lot of reasons, whether it's their work standard, professional reputation, or just what's strategic. So, the Texans are in lots of negotiations. Some I report on, some I don't. Some get to a sensitive stage where I might not want everyone to know what am I doing? What's my knowledge level? Uh, you know, could a story be possibly leaked somewhere if you put something out too early? So all kind of things happen. But in my opinion, getting off on a tangent a little bit there, but with the combine, guys can certainly help or hurt themselves. You generally don't just stay the same. You either reinforce things people believed about you in a good way or a bad way.
So you mentioned Xavier Worthy, and he is a name that a lot of people, I've heard some local media talk about, and fans are talking about when you, in terms of what the Texans should be looking for. Did you get any sense? And I saw the interviews with Nick and D'Amico from the combine, and I know that they've done a very good job of being really kind of tight-lipped about maybe who they're looking at and it's specifically what they're looking for. Did you get any sense from being there that anybody kind of stood out to them, or they showed a particular interest in a particular player or position while you were in Indy?
They did not discuss a single college player on or off the podium, but we also did not ask about any player. I think it tends to be a question like we look for what is a throwaway? I don't like throwaway questions because all that time is valuable with them. So my questions tended to be about free agents, like specifically Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman, Steven Nelson. We were able to ask some questions about Motor Singletary. Even if they're not saying if they're going to re-sign them, I'm trying to gauge their enthusiasm. So which player were they most enthusiastic about?
Yes.
I would say Motor Singletary of all the free agents they were asked about. And
That's
they still
surprising
haven't.
to you?
No, it really wasn't.
Mhm.
I think in some of these ones, I kind of know where it's headed, and I've done some reporting on it. Like I think Blake Cashman will hit free agency. I think Jonathan Grenard will cash in free agency, and it will get to a number where the Texans will decide we're not going to do that number, so he will leave. There are other ones where it could go either way.
What about
Maybe a
Sheldon
Steven Nelson.
Rankins? What do you talk about him? Do you think
They like him.
did
We
they
didn't get a
resign him?
question in about him, but my reporting is that he is of interest to them and he would like to return. So he is a possibility of coming back. And happy to run down any of the other ones, if that's something you want to do. They're in, like they said, constructive dialogues. They're in a back and forth where they're in a negotiation. They completed two of them with Dalton Schultz and Kaimi Fairbairn, and none of that was a surprise. They were already kind of during the combine, we were hearing that those were guys they were prioritizing and that they thought they could get something done with where it's mutual and they're not far off on money. So they got them done. And, essentially what are we doing? We're doing a play-by-play of business negotiations, and that's what's happening. And so Nick Caserio continues to try to hold on to some of his own free agents. Whether he'll be successful, all of these things always hinge on what's the number, what would the player accept. But I'm expecting more re-signings. I think including some guys in the secondary could be back. Desmond King could be back. Chris Boyd is a special teamer. He could be back.
Talking with Aaron Wilson, he is a KPRC Texans insider. As you look at this Texans roster, before we go to a couple of changes on the coaching staff, if you look at the roster and you had to say, Kim, this is what, if I were Nick Caserio and D'Amico, this is where I think I'd focus. If we've heard all the money about the cap space they have, right? They've got more cap space, and this is a year they could go make a splash with a free agent. Where would you spend that? Would you go defensive line? Would you go, go offensively? And would you get one of those running backs? There are several available, so the market is not as tight as I think some thought it might be. Where would you spend your biggest money if you were looking at free agency?
I would have kind of a spending hierarchy where I would begin with the defensive line, and then I would look at the off-the-ball linebacker spot, and then running back, and with receiver and corner being somewhat lower priorities. I don't, from everything I'm hearing, expect them to be in on the highest end of the running back or linebacker market. They could be in on Christian Wilkins, and that would be expensive. Sounds like Chris Jones and the Chiefs are going to keep working together at a much higher price. They won't be alone on Wilkins, though, so they're going to have to get into something of a bidding situation, and that could get to where it's unpalatable for Nick Caserio and the Texans. He's still going to maintain a budget. They are hosted on Wednesday a defensive tackle, Foley Fotukasi, and he's visiting with the Bills today. I'll probably make a decision
That's
over
the
the
guy
weekend.
from the Jaguars, right?
Big guy, 6'4", 318,
Yeah.
very experienced, former Jaguars starter, and he signed with them for $30 million. And he was supposed to make $7 million this year, but he was a cap cut. So probably that's what he's looking for, 6, 7, which I think will be lower than Sheldon, where Sheldon's more in that 10, 11 to 12 range. And then Wilkins, I'm hearing 20 to 21 million, maybe more. So that's very expensive. Obviously, he's a great athlete and a little bit more dynamic even than Sheldon,
Right.
but whether, Nick will want to spend, I think he's looking for quality and some quantity. So, Jerry Jacobs from the Lions, that would be a good number 2 corner for them to look at. He wasn't tendered at that second round level, so he's heading to free agency. As far as off the ball, I heard more Azeez Al-Shaair from the Titans than, say, as has been rumored, with Patrick Queen. I do know that Patrick Queen has interest in the Texans. So does Saquon Barkley, and so do a lot of people. But like I reported on Saquon, just talking to CJ Stroud is not a green light to join the team. It's still up to Nick and D'Amico because they run the team as far as whether they're going to be competitive financially. That's all it comes down to mostly is money. And in my expectation, they will, spend their money, I think, on these D linemen. I think they'll, if they can't get back Grenard, maybe they're on Chase Young, who would like to go back to the Niners if he can get in between that 14 and $17 million range. He's someone that has elite traits, but he's played to sort of a tier 1 traits, but tier 2 production. So it's been a little bit of that.
Let me ask you a question. When you mentioned Jonathan Grenard, we know that he probably, he is a free agent. What do you think the number is for Grenard, and what is the appetite for bringing back a Jonathan Grenard, or trying to find somebody for a little less money? I always wonder about that.
Well, they'd like to have him back. It's just a matter of, sorry about that. They would like to have him back. Phone rings all the time, pretty much.
Well, that's how you have all the information. We understand.
I can't only be chasing them. They got to chase me a little bit too. But for Grenard, they want him back, but it's going to get to a point. I've been saying this for a while. When it's over 20 million, that it's going to be bad for their budget. It's not that they can't do it. It's just is he dominant enough and durable enough for them to do it? And I think the answer is probably not. There's still times where, do I think they can get someone just as good? No, I don't. I think they're going to have problems getting someone to replace him. You may have to look at going in the draft. If you're getting a veteran, it's not the same quality because he's clearly one of the best.
One of the best. We're talking with Aaron Wilson, a KPRC insider, a Texans insider who has covered the NFL for years. He's a beat writer. He is well connected with agents around the league, which is really where a lot of the information comes from. We've heard them talk a lot. We heard D'Amico talk at the end of the season. We heard him talk in the off season about wanting the run game to improve. You mentioned that they have an appetite about Devin Motor Singletary, who of course came in late in the year and ran well for them. Do you think that they're going to bring back Dameon Pierce, or does he get to come back and try to earn a spot? Or do they go out and get one of these names, maybe a Saquon or a Derrick Henry or one of the free agent running backs on the market? What are your thoughts about what they do to improve this run game?
Right. What I was hearing at the combine and continue to hear now that I'm back in Houston and working the phones is that they would like a 2-back system with Motor Singletary being a part of it. So they have an ability to have more than one back. With Dameon, I would say, I think he's coming back as probably the 3rd back and a kick returner rather than 1 or 2 back. I don't think that they're going to just say, okay, well, he just didn't fit our system that year. We're going to try it again and just, see how it goes. And I don't think there's a lot of trade value because he's coming off of a poor season where he lost his starting job. As far as other replacements, I think perhaps a Tony Pollard or a DeAndre Swift, not hearing as much like a Josh Jacobs or a Saquon Barkley right now. So if Nick could change in a New York second Monday, Tuesday during the tampering period, he actually follows the rules too. So knowing as much about exactly what he'll spend, he's not talking money. He's not meeting with these agents for these other guys. So, many people, we know a lot of their hand, what cards they have because they don't necessarily follow all the rules. But Nick is a purist. He does follow them. He does a great job. He's really, I think, grown into this position. He's coming off of his best year last year, and now they're starting to win. So, yeah, in my opinion, it's going well, and they'll keep it going.
So we're talking about what the Houston Texans might do with free agency. Let's talk a little bit about the free agency and the process. You talked about the period before it starts, and how there's some people who winker, making some early contact before you should. Explain the free agency process and the timeline.
So Monday and Tuesday are days when you're allowed to talk to people. You can talk about the hypothetical of an agreement. You cannot formally sign someone. You can get pretty close to where you have agreed to terms verbally, or but you should obviously you have to wait to make it official on Wednesday after 3 p.m. Central, when free agency officially starts. So this is supposed to be the 2 days to set the prices and for everybody to check. There's also a time when you might decide to make more roster cuts. More people will hit the market. You might opt to, if you're a free agent, say, you know what, I'm going to look around. I want to hear from these other teams before I make a decision on, am I leaving my current team? Even though, obviously you're an unrestricted free agent, but you're still kind of not until Wednesday. And people can, enter into agreements, but they're not binding. So it's still a competition financially for these teams and who's going to keep it. That's how it'll work. And then Wednesday is pretty wild because people can sign deals, formalize their signatures, and then where people are. And then the one player comes off the board, then you see, well, who's the second or third best, and then the opinions vary on all of that.
Let me ask you something. One of the teams that has been interesting to watch so far has been the Buffalo Bills, because they were so far over in terms of cap space. And so there are many who say, well, they're having a fire sale, right? They're trying to move people off of their roster to get to a better number. What do you expect to happen from Buffalo? Do you think that there's anyone from that roster that we saw last year who surprisingly might be available because of these cuts? What are your thoughts about what Buffalo is going to do?
Right. I mean, they officially processed all of them except for Tre'Davious White, but like Jordan Poyer and some other players, they're all off of the roster. So they processed those moves. They announced them as well. And now they're off the roster. I think Tre'Davious White is interesting as a potential number 2 corner, very accomplished, has had some injuries, but a good player. I think he'll get some interest in free agency. In some cases, like a Jordan Poyer, I'm wondering, how much is left, and why didn't his team figure out a way to do it? So, is there much left? Is the juice still worth the squeeze? That's something that people have to be very wary of. Just because someone was productive with one team doesn't mean that translates to every other team, or that other teams are going to want them. But, that's why they're fans. We have people that essentially are playing fantasy football. I don't enjoy that or participate. I'm more what is actually reportable. So I just stick with what I consider to be just the journalism. What do you know? What can you prove? That type of thing. What are you pretty sure about? And if you're not pretty sure, well, what do they say? Keep your mouth shut. Because you might make a fool of yourself. But anyone can do anything. I don't think people really keep receipts, but I would just tell you there, like Nick, when he says there's some bad info out there sometimes, he's not.
He often says that. Yeah. Well, we know that. We also know that sometimes agents put stories out in the market because they wanted to help their client. Let me ask you about a guy from the Houston Texans.
Teams do it too.
Teams do it too. Absolutely. Teams do it too. About a guy from the Texans, a position that I want to know if you're hearing anything, and that is safety. in terms of the spot. So we know that they like Jimmy Ward a lot. He had some injury challenges.
Yep.
And Petrie, they like Petrie, but Petrie struggled last year. And so
absolutely.
is that a space that they would go out maybe and make a splash in free agency, or would they look to the draft? What are you hearing about the safety
not a
position?
splash per se, Kim, but I would say what they're doing is they're going to monitor some of these guys that are just hitting the market. So if there's opportunities, Justin Simmons is now out there. How much
Yeah.
does Justin get from someone else? Is he, now that he's free, what are his financial expectations? With looking at their own guys, my sense is that Jimmy will be back and Jalen will be back, and that they will do their best to try to get that tandem going with, hopefully, I know I've talked to Jimmy a little bit in his promotions of his children's book, and also, just seeing him, with, actually we did a sushi lunch with him for a sort of a foodie feature that me and R. Alexander are working on. My feel is that he's back, that he'll just try to have a healthier season. And if he does that, he's obviously one of D'Amico's guys from the 49ers.
Right.
I think you might have your two starting safeties already, and you hope that Jalen will play better next year. Maybe with coaching and time. Yeah.
I think we all saw that when Jimmy Ward was on the field, even when he wasn't 100%, they were a lot better with him on the field, right? It's his communication, it's his knowledge of the system, it's his veteran leadership. I mean, he clearly, if he's healthy enough, is a great guy to be back there and helpful to a young guy like Jalen. And even though Jalen's only going into his third year, so hopefully you start to see more of what we saw from Jalen as a rookie than we did from him in year two.
Right.
Forward.
Young players, they do get better. They do improve. I think that when you look at Jalen, I think sometimes he was either too aggressive or he wasn't reading it quite the way he should. It was a new defense for him. And I would think in his second year in that defense that he'll have opportunity to improve. Just remember, though, he should not have had the numbers he had. The interceptions are fine, but that high number of tackles as a rookie, even though he missed several tackles, I would say that was the product of a bad defense too, where he's the last line of defense, so he has to make the play.
Right.
This year was a step back, and they wanted him to play a certain way, and so it was an adjustment for him. But maybe in year three, he's a little more comfortable, and the plays start to come to him. So I look at it as, you don't want to give up on Jalen. You want to ride that out. But they do need a safety. I mean, Eric Murray was a good player for them as a backup. He's a free agent. MJ Stewart was injured. He is back. That's good that he did a 2-year deal. Not a lot of 2-year deals last year, a lot of 1-year deals. So Andrew Beck and MJ were a couple of the multi-year deals that they did. And so it's good to have guys back. This is tough, but, this was the way that Nick wanted it. And a lot of times guys only wanted to do a 1 year because they weren't sure about the Texans. So putting that in perspective, looking at their roster, a lot of the reasons why guys aren't on multi-year deals, one, they don't deserve it, or two, they didn't feel confident in the Texans long term. So they were thinking, well, I'll showcase for 1 year with Houston, and then maybe I'm leaving. But now a lot of guys probably wish they could have done 2-year deals, even if it was a good market number.
Talking with Aaron Wilson, a Texans insider from KPRC here in Houston. I want to put a pin in the Texans for just a moment, and I want to ask you just something about the NFL in general. Two questions. Who is the most, coveted? Who's the number one free agent available this offseason? And then I want to ask you about two different quarterbacks and where you think they may land. What do you think is going to happen with Russell Wilson? And what are the Bears going to do about Justin Fields? But first, who's the top rated, if you had to say, free agent on the market that people are looking at?
Best player, regardless of position. I do think someone might make more money than him, like Kirk Cousins might make the most. And I know quarterback's the most valuable spot, but I would say the best free agent, and we'll see, does he hit the number, hit the market? It looks like he is going to get really close to it. If he doesn't, is Chris Jones, the defensive tackle from the Chiefs. That's the
Yeah.
player that I would want the most and would pay the most for, other than a quarterback. To answer your quarterback question, Kirk Cousins, definitely interest from the Falcons. It's mutual. We'll see if that happens. If he goes to Atlanta, that could make it difficult for the Bears, because maybe they're not trading him there then, so they have to find another trade partner. I think it's a couple of third-round picks, or a second-round pick and a third-round pick, not a first-round pick, for Fields. And a lot of people would assume that it would be Pittsburgh, but they are going to meet with Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson could be going to Pittsburgh, and that could close the door possibly for a Justin Fields trade, because I'm sure they will draft Caleb Williams and they will trade Justin Fields. Another scenario, if they don't like the trades, you could play Fields until Williams is ready, but Williams seems like one of those guys, he's going to be ready from first day, like CJ Stroud. So I would expect that they probably have to move on. I'm just not sure on the trade partner, since Atlanta seems to have other ideas. What could change that? What if Kirk Cousins stays with the Vikings, and then the Bears could execute a trade to Atlanta with Fields? Does Baker Mayfield go back to the Buccaneers? Yes, I believe he does. So some quarterback musical chairs at play.
What about the Raiders? Could they be in the market for a quarterback with a free agent quarterback this offseason?
I could see it. I could see them doing that. I think the Raiders are kind of quiet, right? That you don't always know what the Raiders are doing, and I think that's obviously by design, and that's their style, to be somewhat secretive. But yeah, I would keep an eye on the Raiders. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't heard anything concrete on them, but absolutely.
Did you get a chance to talk with Caleb Williams at the Combine, and what were your thoughts about just his interviews, the ones that either you had or you saw?
I didn't ask him questions. I just kind of observed what he was doing, and I thought he handled some of the more rude questions well. Definitely that one guy came in pretty hot to start that press conference. So, I thought he handled everything well. What the teams are just thinking about is, like, what's the dad like? How demanding? How realistic are some of his expectations in terms of access and all of the perks that they want? So, his dad's probably not doing him any favors, and so that's something I think that Caleb goes into those interviews having to combat. But I thought he handled it all very well. It's just a matter of what is the agenda sometimes of other people that are trying to trip you up. But yeah, to me, and I'm a little biased, even though he's from my rival high school. He's from Gonzaga, and I went to St. John's High School. And so that's our longtime rivals. That's like the game we always want to win when you play Gonzaga. These are both Catholic schools where I'm from in Washington, D.C., and I played high school football there. Not to the level of Caleb Williams. I was a walk-on in East Carolina, but I kind of wish him well. We're both from the DMV area, and he's from the Catholic conference that I grew up playing in, and we've produced, proud of our legacy. We've produced some guys. We've had some NFL players from our school, St. John's, which is kind of like an Under Armour program. Our fullback and nose guard is Kevin Plank, who founded Under Armour. So he's the big booster of the program and on the board of trustees. So we have some good backing. We didn't have that kind of financial backing when I was going to school there, but we do now. But yeah, I like Caleb. I mean, everything. Maybe I'm mildly biased just because I'm a DC guy, but I don't have a problem with him. I would say, he's all right. Just it's okay to be a little different. He was emotional one time when they lost. He wants to paint his fingernails, whatever,
Listen, that happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
I cover the NBA. The painted fingernails are a thing these days. Trust me. For those who don't know some of the backstory about the Caleb Williams, the wide receiver from USC, Aaron mentioned his father. He doesn't have an official football agent. His father has been kind of his business manager. And so people may ask, well, why would he have that? So remember this whole NIL thing for college athletes. Sometimes you need somebody to manage some of that, because the higher rated players are getting a whole lot of inquiries and opportunities and money, right? So there are people who say, here's another guy that's coming in and he doesn't have an official NFL agent. And let me ask you this, Aaron, The other side of that conversation is, well, a guy who's going to be a first round draft pick, and especially if you're talking about him being the number one pick overall, those rookie contracts there's not a lot of, negotiating to do on those, right? There's kind of a scale. Do you really need an NFL agent to do that first deal for you? Is that necessary, or is that just kind of, it's the way it's supposed to be, as I make the air quotes?
You don't, but you could use an agent possibly to deal with teams. There might be some things that, and they do have help. They just don't really let them get any attention. But you might not want your dad to be the one that's running point when the teams have some tough questions about, things that are involving use, or why was this way, or all those things, or just the scheduling. Maybe that's not his forte. Who knows? Maybe he's good at it.
Right.
I don't know. There are a lot of private workouts. There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of interviews. There's endorsements. So there are reasons to have at least someone, and maybe they do. I think they have a
Yeah.
team of lawyers and marketing
Yeah.
people, but I think that's what he needs more so. But
Right.
nothing's going to affect his draft status unless he sticks his foot in his mouth or something, or has some other issue.
Exactly.
I'm not.
That's what I heard, that he does have a team of lawyers and some marketing people. And it takes me back, Aaron, to a Lamar Jackson in his last free agency period, when people were like, he's not
Yeah.
going to get a deal without an NFL agent. He's talking to his mother. And as it turns out, he did get a deal.
He sure
Laramie
did.
Tunzel got a deal.
Laramie has advice, but Laramie is heavily involved. Laramie right now, he isn't even using the same gentleman that he used before, Saint. So he's doing it with himself, and he has his manager Lalu and the whole Divine Tree crew. All good guys, all very smart. He has a financial advisor. He has the NFLPA behind him. If something was to come up, like a restructure or whatever, not that there is right now, they don't need the cap space, but you can do it untraditionally. And just like media, do we all have to work for a traditional media company to still have a voice? Obviously not. That's the
Yeah,
power of social
obviously
media.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
as someone that, I come from a newspaper background, so now I work for a television station, but I'm still writing the same things. It's a different platform, but what is it? It's still journalism. It's just a matter of, what are you choosing? So not everyone has to do everything the same way. Not everyone has to be a conformist, and not everybody, because you do it differently, doesn't mean you're a rebel. It's just sometimes people don't like what they don't understand, but
Right.
that's okay. It makes us all different.
Yeah.
And like I always say, this is not Russia. This is a free country. So I celebrate that. We have certain freedoms, and we have those freedoms constitutionally and in business for very good reasons. But at
Well,
some
I think you
point,
make a really good point. I mean, I think it is different. I think
thank you.
that when I see a guy like Caleb Williams and his, having a team of people, lawyers, marketing people, and having his dad be his
Yep.
business manager, who's obviously getting guidance legally, as long as he's not backing himself into a corner, I don't have a problem with it. And you're right. I mean, my background's journalism. I come from newspaper and television. And so now, even though I use a different platform, I still employ the same approach to covering stories because I'm a journalist. And
Right.
so I think I actually like the fact that some of these guys are like, you know what? They're not just saying, I'm going to come in because I don't want to pay anybody. I'm just going to have a different kind of team. And so I think it's kind of interesting. I like the fact that people are maybe doing some things differently. So Aaron, before I let you go, because I've taken up
Yes.
way more time than you probably thought I was going to, and I appreciate you being here. We're
No
definitely going to
problem. Thanks for having me. Yes.
have you come back. Let me ask you, if there is a position, you said earlier, you figure for the Texans, it would be probably up front on the defensive line. You talked about Blake Cashman. I heard Mina Kimes talk about him on ESPN, how he's a linebacker that people should watch because he can really play all the positions. He also is good in coverage. And that, other than late in the year with Christian Harris, the linebackers for the Texans weren't great in coverage. Where do you think the Texans will make, I don't want to say, Where do you think they'll plant their flag in terms of what they really want? We know D'Amico is a defensive guy. We saw that he could obviously manage both sides of the ball. He had a great first year as a head coach, but he's talked about needing that being dominant up front. If they don't bring back a guy like if they lose Grenard and Rankin, what do you think that front looks like next year? Who's joining Malik Collins and Will Anderson Jr.?
Hard to predict the future, but some names to keep an eye on that, potential replacements. A Chase Young, looking at, the defensive end position. Christian Wilkins inside. Obviously, they have him in the building as of a couple days ago, so maybe he's not the only replacement, but Afolu Fatukasi is a possibility. So he'll make a decision, and Texans are in the mix on him. But that doesn't, it's not the same. He's more of a run stuffer than a dynamic pass rusher like, Wilkins or, what you get from Rankins. But, you have Malik Collins back. I would say, there'll be some names that come up that people don't really know that much about that will come up, if Steven Nelson leaves, what about a Jerry Jacobs potentially, the Lions corner. So there are other options. And one of the reasons that things surprise people is because very few people have the wealth of understanding and the time and the research into who's the sixth best defensive end, who fits this scheme better, this guy or that guy. So, the teams are experts for a reason. Doesn't mean they're always right, but usually there's a reason why they might be doing something. And you see these lists, and some of them are amusing to me because it's like, really? Okay. I mean, I don't understand some of them, but that's okay. That's why it's opinions. Everybody's got a right to a different opinion. But I anticipate, maybe they take on some water with some changes in the front seven. So I would watch that closely.
Front seven defensive. Aaron Wilson, Texas Insider, KPRC.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending
Love the
some time
applause.
today. Absolutely. You deserve it. Keep up the great work. We are following. I'm following. And I'll talk
Thank
to
you.
you soon,
Yes.
my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I am on X at Aaron Wilson _NFL, and I also use Instagram at Aaron Wilson 7128. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron Wilson, if you're not following him, you should. He has okay. I'm not sure what happened there. Hello. Are we still connected? It looks like it. All right. So listen, I'm back. That was interesting. I hit some button as I was letting Aaron go. And so thank you guys for being here. Are you back? Let me know if you can hear me. I think there was a little. Okay, there we go. We're back. All right. So listen, that was Aaron Williams, KPRC Insider of Texans. He has great information about the Texans and the NFL, as you can see. I appreciate you guys all being flexible with the different time of the show. Maybe I go back to Thursdays. I used to do Thursdays when I started the show back in 2000 and was it 14 or 15? At any rate, listen, make sure you follow. I will continue to update you on what's happening around the National Football League. Also with the Houston Rockets. We didn't get to Astros today, but I'll be posting some sound from spring training. And I invite you to listen in and be a part of that. So in the meantime, remember, like I mentioned, this week was an election week. If you did not vote because you weren't registered, I'm encouraging you to get registered, right? If you're already registered, that's awesome. You should stay registered. And make sure that you educate yourself about the candidates. I will never say who you should vote for. I'm a journalist. That's not my position, but I will encourage you to vote. You're going to always hear me talk about being registered to vote and you participating in voting. And who should you vote for? You should vote your values. The values for you, your family, and your community. That's who you should vote for. So that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk. I appreciate you being here. As always, thank you all for being a part and engaging. A special thanks to Aaron Wilson, who joined us for the first time on Chalk Talk. We'll have him back as we get into free agency, as it officially kicks off next week, and then as we get closer to the draft, which is coming up later in April. But until then, remember, do something kind for yourself and do something kind for somebody else. Make it a great week, everybody. Peace.